Well, good morning, everyone. So glad to have you today. I think we've got about 104 people registered. Not everyone is on yet, so I've waited a couple of minutes, but I think it's by my watch about 10:02. So we'll go ahead and get started this morning. We are beginning a 5-week series every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time until May the 1st on leadership in challenging times. And of course, this week is on the whole matter of these SBA loans, the finances that we're going to try to get demystified for you this morning. And there will be other topics in the coming weeks. If you're interested, we would love to have you join. There may be some that you select and some that you don't select. And if you find this beneficial today, I certainly would welcome you inviting other people or encouraging us to invite them on your behalf. And you'll obviously have the Zoom link so that you can do that. I want to start with a little bit of a story here. When we're growing up, we look at our parents as being sort of the fearless ones, and we find great security in being able to look to them in times when we are afraid. And as leaders, we need to be the ones that are facing this difficult time fearlessly, and we need to certainly exude confidence during these times. And sometimes we may not feel that confidence. And I want to encourage you to allow the coronavirus to help you maybe reset some priorities for yourself and allow it not only to, you want to be avoiding being exposed to it, obviously, but maybe it has exposed something within us where our priorities have been amiss. And here's an opportunity to maybe reset some priorities as a result of this very terrible context. So that's my broad insight for the day. And today I'd really just like to start by talking with Joe Montgomery. And Joe, thanks for being here. Appreciate that. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say about all of these SBA loans and other matters during this financial time. The way the format is going to work today, hopefully, is Joe and others that he asked will take a few minutes here and sort of demystify the regulations as we understand them today, what your options are, and then the balance of the hour will be spent actually just answering your questions. So I have muted everyone. You can certainly unmute yourself, but this will avoid some of the background noise given the vast number of people we have on the call. So Joe Montgomery, if you would sort of walk us through this CARES Act and any other things that we need to hear during this time.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate the intro. Boy, I got to tell you what, this week has been absolutely crazy, as I'm sure all of you have experienced. Joe 3, with which Joe, feel free to unmute your mic. Both of us have probably spent 10 to 12 hours a day over the last week and a half, doing nothing but helping our clients get through this journey that we're all on. We've got multiple payroll tax credits. We've got payroll tax deferrals. We've got unemployment and the additional federal amount that's allowed. We've got all of the tax changes that have occurred, including the look back. We've got the EIDL loan, and then the crown of the whole journey we've been on is the PPP loan. There's a lot going on here, and I know everybody's really interested in the loan piece. So Joe 3, if you can share your screen and pull up the graphic that we have. And you can shoot right down to the, I'll go to the next slide real quick, but this is basically what I just discussed, and flip down to the loan. So this is the difference between the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL loans. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but the highlights of this are the fact that the PPP is forgivable depending on your current situation and how the funds are used. There's a limited maximum amount that can be used for the PPP compared to the EIDL. But with the EIDL, even though it's not forgivable, you do have a $10,000 grant that will be given to you. The government initially said within 36 hours. With the volume that is occurring, we're telling clients 7 days. The interest rate is phenomenal. Even with the EIDL loan, 3.75, but the PPP is even more incredible, 1%. It used to be 0.5. The government just changed it late last night about midnight to 1%. There's no advance available, but it is forgivable. And that is the huge plug to the economy that I think we all need to be taking advantage of. The process of doing that and calculating the maximum loan amount is pretty intricate. Last night about midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, the government decided to pull out the contract labor piece to calculate the maximum amount. So that has gotten everybody scrambling, changing their applications, and the application itself changed last night at about midnight or so. So things are very dynamic, changing almost hourly, which is pretty incredible considering this is the government. There's lots of other aspects of this CARES Act that we're still figuring out, to be honest with you. A lot of the credits and so forth, you've got to be careful at how you utilize those. So you've got multiple credits, payroll tax deferrals, unemployment, and then you get the loans. And how do all those things mesh together? And what is the best way to optimize that for your business? There's not one size fits all. It depends on your business and what your situation is. And that is what we've been spending literally the last week and a half trying to help our clients with, help them navigate this whole process. That's kind of a summary of this. I'm being pretty quick because I know there's a lot of questions out there. But before I open it up for questions, Joe 3, do you want to add anything to this?
I think, you know, just some general advice on this. Been in about 20 or 30 phone consultations in the past 3 days with clients, and recommending we all kind of go for that EIDL because you're going to get the free 10,000 either way as a grant. So even if you're denied the application for the EIDL, that $10,000 is a grant and you do not have to pay it back. I'm recommending to our clients that they do both. So start with the EIDL. It'll get that quick pop of money, $10,000 within about 7 days. If you go for that PPP loan, which you have to do with your lender, your accountant can help you through that process. That $10,000 grant from the EIDL will just be reduced. The forgiveness on the PPP will be reduced by the $10,000 is how that works. So you can definitely apply for both, and you can also refi the EIDL into that PPP loan. So those are just some strategies there. We'll talk about unemployment in a bit because there's some related strategy on that. It's worth noting that the covered period on the PPP is June 30. So you can apply for that up till June 30. On the EIDL, that's available through year end. So my advice to our clients is this: apply for everything you can get on that EIDL. That can go up to $2 million. The PPP is limited to your payroll. So if your business's payroll is $100,000 a month, go for the $2 million on the EIDL. Start the application process, get your $10,000. It's going to take 30, 45 days at least on the EIDL for closing. You can decide not to close. You can decide, I don't need the money, but at least the application's in. And if you choose to, you can deposit in your bank. You floated cash flow with the PPP loan. You can let the EIDL loan sit there. We are recommending for this specific event because at the end of this process, when you have to prove to your lender how you spent the money for the PPP, because there's a process, there's a certification where you have to show the lender, yes, we did indeed spend the PPP funds on the rent and the employees. So that certification process, going back to the bank, we don't know what that's going to look like yet. We don't know how intense that might be. It's going to involve submitting a bunch of other documentation. What we're recommending is that you go get 2 separate bank accounts for this. Get one for the EIDL and get one for the PPP. Treat your business bank accounts as if you were an attorney, and these are trust accounts. And for substantiation documentation purposes, that'll make things much easier on yourself, your accountant, whoever's helping you through this process. And if anything is questioned, you have more defense. It could be one of those things that we all laugh at in 2 years and say, remember that day that we all opened up a bunch of bank accounts and didn't need to? But it could also be the thing that allows you to get the full forgiveness. So just recommending it just in case. Those are other thoughts to add on the 2 loans that I have. Do you want to move on?
Yeah, sure.
I tell you that, guys, that was excellent. Could you, I know we're going to have time for questions, and I know you want to move to other things. Could you explain, however, on the independent contractors, what changed last night?
Yes. So here's a situation there. I'm talking with 10 other accounting firms that have 20, 30 applications already prepared, and we're all kind of freaking out as accounting firms because we have these applications done. Some of us included independent contractor pay, some of us did not. The issue is double dipping. And here's what I mean. You have a business, 100,000 monthly payroll. You're a contractor. You also have 300,000 in independent contractor pay per month. In this code section on PPP, all of your independent contractors are going to be filing for the PPP themselves. So I think SBA, IRS realized this and said, you can't do both. If the parent company, the construction company, can't apply for PPP, and those independent contractors also use those same dollars for their PPP calc. So that's what happened.
If you look at the documents, I got up early this morning in preparation for this. If you look at the documents, however, for lender guidance on the Treasury site, it says something about 1099 MISC. So even this morning, it didn't appear that eliminated contractors. So I'm a little puzzled. I'm not certainly questioning. I'm just wanting to make sure that this is definitive as far as you know, and that lender guidance that was even put out this morning is still not the latest.
That's right. As far as we can tell, and that's the thing, these things are updating so fast that you look at some of the big 4 accounting firms even, and certainly firms our size, we're all struggling to keep up our content. So for example, Elliott Davis has a wonderful resource center. We have a resource center too. SBA has documentation. Many groups do, and there's so much misinformation out there right now. it's crazy. So as these things are updated every few hours, the truth is everybody's struggling to keep up and to change the numbers and update what's true and what's not. So I'm not shocked. There's probably a lot of that out there. I expect that over the next day, those gaps will be closed as people update their material, but I'm sure we're going to see that.
Jim, I know that several of the banks, once the changes came out last night after midnight, they have been scrambling since this morning in trying to figure out what the documentation is. Some of these changes have really thrown a lot of people for a loop, but I'm convinced that your question about the 1099 miscellaneous should be excluded from that calculation. I'm so convinced I've already submitted the application to my bank with the reduced number. You're muted, Jim.
Thank you. Please carry on the other matters within the package. Thank you.
So the unemployment, this is a fairly simple one. And Joe, feel free to add whatever you want to add to on this. But the bottom line is, I think South Carolina's unemployment is about 360 or so and change per week. The feds have said we're going to add another $600 per week for at least the 4 weeks. And there's no 1 week waiting period. In addition to that, the employer can file unemployment for all of its employees. So instead of all your employees having to go out there onto the website and do their own application, you as the employer, as a more friendlier, warm, connected way of telling your employees, hey, listen, I'm going to file unemployment for all of you. We're going to do this for X number of weeks. I would recommend 4 because of the 600 per week. But we're not letting you go. We're going to hire you back after that time period. So it's a much friendlier way of doing this. The other thing is you're not going to get dinged for all of your employees filing unemployment. So your rate will not go up. And that's fantastic because most employers understand that if you have somebody filing unemployment, they're going to ding your rate. And I'm getting questions coming in here, so bear with us as we deal with these questions. The first one that I've got here is, how do we determine if we can utilize the PPP money for payroll, rent, and utilities?
Dad, if you want to,
go ahead.
I'm happy to answer these on the chat as we go on.
All right, well, let's keep moving then, if you're answering via the chat. So the payroll tax credit. You have to have suffered a 50% reduction in gross receipts from quarter to quarter. So first quarter of 2020 compared to first quarter of 2019. If your gross receipts have dropped 50% or more, then you're eligible. There is something else in the code, and I don't know if you've seen that, Joe, where it says if you've been affected by the COVID-19 crisis. That's another option, but we need to explore that a little bit more because that's not as definitive as the 50% reduction. But you get a 50% refundable tax credit per employee per quarter up to the first $10,000 of wages that you've paid to the employee. So let me illustrate that point. You've got 4 employees that you've paid, let's say $15,000 each. The maximum is the 10, so 10,000 times 4 employees is your 40 grand. Times 50% is $20,000. Let's assume your first 941 is $12,000 in taxes that you owe. you can apply $12,000 against that $12,000 tax due and owe nothing. And then you will have a carry forward of $8,000 to utilize the remaining 20. The biggest issue here is you can't double dip. So if you get that forgiven, you can't then get the maximum amount on the PPP loan forgiven as well. It's going to reduce that forgiveness on the PPP, just like the advanced $10,000 on the EIDL will reduce that PPP forgiveness. Does that make sense?
Yes, strategy point. Because you cannot do both, this payroll tax credit and PPP, we've done a number of scenarios, and we're finding most of the time the PPP is a far greater benefit, because particularly if you have lower paid workers. The PPP money may run out. I've heard forecasts as early as 3 to 5 days. So if you go through the application process and you were unable to get the PPP funds because they run out, you can go back to that payroll tax credit. But I'd start with the PPP. Have your accountant run the numbers. We're finding most of the time PPP is best.
Joe, you can go to the next one. So this piece was the first one that came out, basically giving people an out for people who were sick, that they could continue to be paid by their employer. There's several options there. Obviously, the person who is sick and having to quarantine themselves because of a government mandated quarantine, they would qualify for those 2 weeks of paid sick leave. But then you've got others where they're not sick themselves, but they're having to care for an individual because of the quarantined, or, and this is where a lot of people will qualify, you know, they've got kids in grade school, and they've got to take care of them. They can't leave them at home alone. So somebody's going to stay there with them. And as you know, a lot of the schools have closed, so a lot of people are going to qualify for that. But it's only 2/3 of the employee's rate. It's not 100% of the employee's rate. You can get an exemption if it's going to create a problem for your business. But the tax credit is a dollar for dollar tax credit, which you file along with your quarterly payroll tax return. Do we have another slide, Joe? So that's the payroll tax credit there, and there's several credits there, but then you also have the payroll tax deferral. So you can defer all employer payroll taxes and self-employment tax, and you don't have to pay it until December of 21 for the first half of it. So if you don't pay any payroll taxes for all of 2020, and you've got $100,000 in payroll taxes that you owe, you can defer paying that until the end of 21, 50% of it, 50,000, and then the other 50,000 can be deferred for another year to the end of 22. And that's interest and penalty free. I believe it's interest, isn't it, Joe? Yep. Okay.
That's right.
Interest and penalty free. So that's an interest-free loan from the government for for a lot of self-employed and small businesses is a very large expense, and you can defer it for an entire 2 years. And then is that our last slide, Joe?
We have a few more. Going to cover rebate checks and some miscellaneous deductions too. And then maybe one more, and I think we'll open it up for questions.
Okay, so this is kind of nice, and there's been a lot of confusion about that. Just a couple of days ago, I don't know if it was the IRS or the Treasury issued a statement that if you've never filed a tax return in the last 10 years because you're on Social Security, you have to file in order to get this $1,200 per adult and $500 per child credit. Well, that kind of blew up in their face because nobody could e-file a zero return because Social Security typically is not taxable income if that's the only thing you're earning. So they pulled that very quickly out of the code section. But typical family, you know, if you got 3 kids and you're married, you're going to have a $2,400 credit for you and your spouse, and then an additional $1,500 for your 3 kids. So it could be a pretty significant credit that you could get in advance. Now, there's been some talk about, well, what happens next year? Am I going to have to pay that back? So if I get an extra $3,400 this year, I get a nice check. Is that going to be an additional tax on my 2020 return? And the answer is no. The advanced tax credit will be part of the 2020 tax forms. So if you got $3,400 in 2020 for, you know, the first part of 2020, that $3,400 will be a credit on your 2020 return, and the two will net out to zero. So you're not going to have an extra tax bill. Obviously, you can read the phase outs there of where you won't get the check anymore. It is calculated on your 2019 or your 2018 tax return AGI. The only time you would have to pay that back. So let's, you know, yes, the credit's on the 2020 return, but what if your income spikes and all of a sudden you're married and you blow right through that 150 to 198? Well, then you're not going to get the credit, and yes, you would have to pay that back. So timing of all this, again, it's still in flux. We're focusing on the regs, and we're trying to stay up to date on this stuff.
What we do know on that is that if you file 2019 and you've made a tax payment in 2019 electronically from your bank account, then you'll receive these checks at a sooner time frame than if you haven't filed your 19 or 18 tax return, for example. We know that for people who don't have to file tax returns because they're on Social Security and they're under the filing threshold, the IRS is going to use their SSA 1099 Social Security statement in this calculation. So if mom or grandma asks, that's what's happening there.
And there's been some discussion about maybe I shouldn't file my 2019 return. But it really is not going to affect you, because if you file your 2019 return and you don't get the check because your income is too high, but then in 2020 your income goes back down, you will get that check. You'll just have to wait a year for it. You can move on, Joe, to the next one. So these are some just miscellaneous provisions in the code. We are actually going back and looking at our 2018 and 2019 returns for our clients that we've already filed, just in case some of these changes affect their returns, and then we'll go ahead and amend their returns for them. Obviously, the excise tax has been suspended. Charitable deductions have increased to 100% of AGI, so no longer are you limited to 60% of your AGI. You can give away all your income if you want. The $300 above the line is pretty small. The interest expense deduction has been changed from 30 to 50%. And now you can take bonus depreciation or 168K depreciation on 15-year property, which some of you may understand what that means. So these provisions in the code, we're going to go back and look to see, can we amend our clients' returns and help them take some additional deductions? So I guess Joe, unless you've got something else to show, we should probably open this up to questions.
I was going to mention one thing on the charitable. So if you have a charitable remainder trust, or if you're a nonprofit, this can be an advertising piece for donor calls for nonprofits, because their largest donors now receive a much greater tax benefit than they typically do, and just for 2020.
Wow, that's excellent. That's excellent. Well, thank you, guys. Please remember, everyone, that you are muted. We've muted everyone except the speakers. Certainly, you can unmute yourself. If you would remute yourself after you ask your question, we would appreciate it. And of course, chat is also available for you.
And Jim, before we do, real quick, last point here, they did expand the retirement withdrawals. You can now take 100K out. So if you've done the EIDL and the PPP, but your business is just cash slammed today, you need the money now, alternative creative funding would be borrow from your retirement account. There's no 10% penalty. You can opt either to pay the tax over 3 years or to repay as a loan and pay no tax. So borrow from your retirement, apply for both loans, get the loans, pay your retirement back, you're good to go.
That's why I'm glad you're our CPAs.
So very quick, very fast changing landscape, a lot of information. Timing is very important. Work with your accountant. Order is important. There's a strategy and a rhythm to this when you balance unemployment versus the tax credits versus the loans. Which ones should you do first? So it's not going to last forever, but this is going to take a while, and we're certainly here to help. The link there is a form. If you need help or want to talk, you can follow that link and book a call. But at this time, we'd love to open it up to questions. And I'll continue to ask or answer questions through chat too.
Joe, this is Jason Craning. Can you hear me?
Hey, Jason.
Yes, sir.
Hey, guys. So for 1099 employees who are contractors, if we have, they've got 1099 submitted from 2019 and they're no longer able to work because of this, can we advise them to file for the EIDL for the $10,000 grant?
You absolutely can. That's a great tip. So if any of you have large contractors, that's an excellent point. Do this for yourself, for your own S-Corp owner wages, but then certainly talk to your contractors and tell them about this stuff and what they need to do.
And in addition to that question, is there a limit if the contractor had made under $10,000 from your business? Can they still get the $10,000 grant, or did they have to have hit a threshold with your business?
That's a very good, that's a great question. So the way it works is their payroll costs as a self-employed contractor are going to be the net profit, net income of their company, even if it's a $10,000 company, from any other sources that they may get over the 12-month period. So if it's a $10,000, that's all that they got, and they have no deductions, divided by 12 times 2.5, you know, they may be eligible for a little $2,000 loan with some forgiveness on that. But that's how you figure it out for them. So I'm getting a question from Craig. Good question, Craig. Order, unemployment, PPP, EIDL. What do you do? EIDL first, because a 10K can come in 7 days. This is very generic advice, but I'll try. If you have large teams and your offices are shut down, you're a restaurant, you're a hotel, you're a dentist, file employer-filed unemployment for your people. Let them take the extra $600 a week for the full 30 days. Then let your EIDL come in. You've already applied for it, by the way. And then let your PPP come in. Rehire your team. As long as you do before June 30, your forgiveness amount is not reduced. So go ahead, draw the extra $600 unemployment for 30 days. Let your team know what you're doing, and do employer-filed unemployment. Then let that PPP float the payroll for the following 2 months. You just achieved 90 days of float through other people's money. That's not right for everybody, but that can be a strategy. And some are mentioning that they've already done that, which is good. They have not received the first check I'm seeing, so know that unemployment will back pay, and they're supposed to remove the 1 week waiting period. That's all what's in the law, but there are delays. The EIDL, for example, was in the law to hit your account in 3 days, and it's taking more like 7 to 10. So, Stacy, I think you did the right thing, and it may take a while, but they will receive back payment for that.
Joe, I've got one more question. This is my last one. Do you know anybody who has received an EIDL $10,000 grant yet?
We do, just a few. Many of the firms in our group, they've applied for their clients last week, and we're starting to see them kind of come in. But it's not in 3 days like they promised. Dan, good question. When are the funds going to run out? We don't know. I would get this in, work with your accountant, get this in ASAP, the PPP. It's very critical that you're first in line. Now here's the truth. The banks are still figuring this out. They're kind of terrified right now because SBA has put all of this on them to do, and us as business owners. Every bank has a slightly different application process. Some of them are asking for too much information to cover themselves. So definitely work directly with your bank, your accountant, to get that in quick.
We have had, I was in conversation with a bank this morning, and they basically said, I know it's open right now, but we are not ready. We anticipate being ready early next week. And they're not saying Monday, they're saying early in the week. So it's very likely that a lot of banks won't even start inputting these applications for another 4 or 5 days.
That's right. Getting some other questions. So by the 3 to 5 days running out, you can still apply and file for the PPP through June 30, but the funds there may not be any money left. That's what we meant. Other question, this is a good one. If you don't really need the EIDL, should you go for it? I would say yes, and here's why. It's a $10,000 free grant, number one, and number two, if you're going for the PPP, it'll just be used to reduce your forgiveness, but you're getting an extra $10K up front. You file the PPP through your bank. The SBA has a link of listed lenders, but today, and they have an application, but you're sending this directly to your lender, the PPP. EIDL, yes, you can do it online through the SBA. Yes, and so Rachel, you're mentioning to everybody, some of your banks are saying things like, hey, we can't take applications. We haven't even been given guidance. In the CARES Act, SBA technically has 30 days to guide the banks. Think about that. We're all needing these applications now. So some of the banks are being a little standoffish with this. We've talked with 7 banks now. What banks are also doing, and some of you know this, is they're choosing only to work with current clients and only their best clients. So the banks are filling up fast. Accounting firms that are helping are filling up fast.
Joe, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
This is Mark Schreiber. Hello, everyone. Just wanted to give a couple aspects of information. First off, regarding the application, our main bank just issued the application process, and to your point, it was directly with existing clients. So as I mentioned in the chat, be very careful when you do apply for this because it does require a lot of information about not only your business, but your personal information. There will be a lot of scams out there trying to get people and businesses to apply for these loans. So when you do, go straight to your bank's website or the SBA website and apply that way. That way you can avoid it being potentially hacked and your personal information or business information taken away from you. And then a second comment, from my perspective, we work in the security and emergency space. So what we're dealing with has been things that have been talked about and exercised for years. We're just now actually addressing these really. So what I can share is take advantage as much of the financial support as you can through these loans, because I doubt anyone on this call has really thought through the financial implications of this pandemic. Think worst case scenario and be prepared to have those finances to support you and keep your business flowing through. An example would be, how can you support your business throughout all of 2020 when you have limited resources, limited access to supplies, and even potential limitations to your supply chain and utilities? That's one of the things that we have seen in gameplay, and it's just one of those issues of cascading failures that really makes businesses difficult to support, because everything is difficult to get and everything is extremely expensive if they can get it. So I just wanted to echo what Joe and Joe have said. Take advantage of this as much as you can, because you may need funding more than you possibly could imagine.
A good time to get cyber insurance, for sure. There's a lot of scams out there that we've already seen. If you are relocating personally, trying to refi a house, I'm actually personally in the middle of that myself. I have not experienced any dings in that regard. It's probably specific to your situation. I think there's going to be a lot of grace in this time from a lot of people, though. So question, can you do PPP and EIDL? That's a great question. And they do specifically ask if you receive money or are you applying for other money. We don't know. That's the bottom line. But here's what we think is going to happen. Apply for both, so either you're in the process. They may make you refi your EIDL into the PPP. I think that's why they're asking the question, from what we can tell. But you're still getting the 10K up front, and you're still getting into the line on both of the loans. Question: is anybody anybody willing to share just how they're handling health insurance with employees or temporary unemployment? Has anybody kind of figured out a good messaging for your teams or a good strategy there? Kind of a
Joe. This is David.
hey,
David. We have just had our employees file their own unemployment. I don't know if all of them have filed yet, because they've been off for a week paid, and now they're off for their second week unpaid and should have filed for unemployment. We've been in contact with some of them. Their insurance is paid through April because it was paid before they left in March. The insurance company have said, that they don't have to, once they are on unemployment, they don't have to go to a COBRA. We can keep them on there as long as it's paid. They don't care when, and typically we pay half of the insurance and the employee pays half. Insurance company doesn't care where it comes from as long as they get their premium. So we're trying to keep them paid.
good. Thanks for sharing that, Dave.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
What is Form 1919? My bank sent that to me. I have no idea what it is.
I've got so many form numbers floating in my head.
Right.
Basically, it's a
form
borrower information form. And what they're trying to do is the SBA is trying to get some demographic information on the businesses that are filing. So they're going to ask things like percentage of ownership, are you a veteran, your gender, race, ethnicity, and they've got a bunch of questions they're asking. So, are you applying for this loan from jail? You know, have you been
Right.
convicted in the last so many years? Those kind of things.
Did they ask me if I look like my CPA?
Well, you'd have to answer yes to that, Dick.
Okay.
Any other questions on the forms? I know a lot of the banks are requiring the SBA Form 413, which is a personal financial statement. Now, in the past, we've done those for clients in our own format because it gives the bank the information they need. Now, we are actually filling out the SBA application because we want this application process to go right through the process as slick as possible and as fast as possible. And if you give a bank a form they're not used to, they're gonna hesitate.
And we've asked, Dad, haven't you actually put together a checklist from the 5 to 7 banks that have communicated with us directly of compiling the common items that they're asking for?
Yes, we have.
If
Now,
you-
some of those may be needed, some of them may not be because the guidance has still not been deciphered yet, but we do have that checklist.
Yeah, if you could, once you get that to the point, Joe, where you feel like it is firm or as best we can, and we'll put all the caveats on it we need to, then we will distribute that out to all the participants on the call. I'm looking at our time now. I think we're about 10 till 11. I really want to honor everyone's time. So if there are more questions, let's please quickly ask those either through chat or verbally. And then I want to talk a little bit about our upcoming 4 sessions and get your input on what you would like to hear. Leadership in challenging times. We're planning on talking about sales and growth. I've got a couple of special facilitators next week. We can do further work on this finance if we need to. And the other thing I would ask though, so you can send me a private message on chat or send me an email for any subjects you would like to see discussed coming up. And if you would answer our polling question for today, which is live, I appreciate many of you that have done that. And I'll get back to your questions. Thank you.
So there's one question that just came out. What is the difference between self-employed and a company that has employees, like a corporation or partnership? And the bottom line is, interpret your net income from Schedule C as your payroll. That's probably the easiest way to sum that up. I mean, there are caveats, but overall, that's probably the best way to do it. I think that's all the questions that I see, Joe, unless you see any. Or if somebody wants to just unmute your mic and just ask more questions, feel free.
If any of you are S Corps, I know there's a few on the call, and you're doing the EIDL application online, they're going to ask you, are you a self-employed individual or are you something else? We're selecting S Corporation on that option. And one of you mentioned that there's a timing difference. If you file as a business, you can actually send in your application today with some banks, if your lender is ready. If you're a self-employed individual, that date, from my understanding, is the 7th. It's a later date, slightly later date.
If
You're
you're
an S Corporation.
If you're an LLC taxed as an S Corp, how does that work? What do you put on the box?
We would put
But
S Corporation. And there has also been a question about, okay, I'm an S Corporation. I may have a few employees, but I'm paying myself as well. Can I use my payroll as part of that monthly payroll cost? And the answer is yes. But then a follow-up question to that has been, Well, what about my K-1 distributions that are reflected on my tax return? Can I use that? The answer is no. That's not considered earned income. That's considered unearned income. So you cannot use your K-1 distributions or earnings.
Unless you're a partnership, right?
Yeah, if you're a partnership, that's a totally different story, because then you've got guaranteed payments, and all of that income, along with your K-1 earnings, are considered earned income, but they're also subject to self-employment tax too.
Given the fluidity of the interpretations, guys, and if we had had this call yesterday, we would have given different guidance potentially than we're giving today. What is the risk that what you're telling us today may change again? And do we in fact need to schedule potentially a follow-up in order to get something that's more firm? Or do you feel as if we're very, very close at this point?
We feel like we're close, but to answer your question, the chance that this information may shift is high.
Mm-hmm.
Over the past 2 days, it literally changed. The interest rate dropped from 4% to 0.5, back up to 1%. The timing dropped from 10 years to 2. So I would highly encourage a call with your accountant, your lender, over the next few days. Let's get the application started and the process in. If it changes, that's fine. We can adjust. But I would recommend another call.
I filled out the EID on the SBA site 3 days ago. Just like you said, I'm filling out both. I did not click the box for the $10,000 initial because I didn't want that to foul up the PPP. If I decide to go with the EID at the point they actually contact me, because it's been 3 days, I still haven't heard from them. At that point, can I still get that $10,000?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't think I can answer that question, to be honest with you.
Because I knew if I got it, once you got it, you kind of committed to that direction, and I thought that could be a mistake because things were so fluid.
Yeah, it really is, Tim. It's very fluid. But if you think about it, why did the federal government even put that checkbox on there? They are trying to get the economy infused with money to keep it going. So if you take a step back to the EIDL loan application, nowhere on that application do they even ask you how much you want. The whole purpose of that is to give you 10 grand. And then they're going to contact you later. Because they completely changed that application process. Some of our clients attempted to do it before they changed it, and it was extremely excruciating to go through the process. A lot harder than what it is now. Now it's a fairly simple process, but keep in mind, that's step one of probably multiple steps to get your EIDL loan. So why did they do all that? I personally think they did it to infuse everybody with an extra 10 grand to keep the economy going. They realized it's not enough. The PPP comes out. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I just know the government, so I didn't try. I knew if I clicked it, I could see them coming back. Oh, you don't qualify for the PPP. That's why I didn't click it.
Interestingly enough, if you look on the new application that came out this morning, when you ask for your PPP, it asks you to net the $10,000, assuming you got it from the other loan. So that was not on the sample document. That is on the final document this morning.
Jim, that's actually a really good point. So if you take that to the next level, if they're asking you to net that 10 grand against the PPP loan, what's the inherent thinking behind the scenes? We want to forgive the PPP loan, but we don't want to forgive the PPP loan plus the 10 grand. So they're having you net it up front. But if you haven't received it, don't reduce the amount. I mean, ask for the full amount.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim.
They're trying to get ahead of cutting out $10,000, having people spend it, and needing that to be reduced from the loan. If they're identifying that early, they're just going ahead and starting to reduce it from the PPP loan.
What we'll do, with your permission, Joe and Joe, is that we will ask Clay to invite the folks that were on the call or registered for the call today to a follow-up call on this, which will be in addition to our normal series. If you guys are comfortable with that, we'll figure out a time that works.
That
Sure.
sounds good, Jim. We are here to help. We are in triage mode for small business, to be blunt. We're handling our clients first, but we're trying to help everybody we can and get this figured out.
And everyone on the call certainly brought insights, wants to just provide the service that you need. Please feel free to contact us with any questions that you have during this tough time. Okay, well, anything else in the last couple of minutes here?
Can you tell me where I get this? I hate to harp on this 1919 form. Should I try to get it from the CPA or from the bank or what?
You can go directly to the SBA website, which if you go to our website, we have a COVID-19 resource center. If you go to that center, the first tile, I believe, is the SBA, and there's a link to the SBA's website.
Okay. Thank you.
Dick, we'll also have available shortly our entire recommended process and packet for PPP, as it is changing every minute, it feels like. Dad has been scrambling to get that put together, so we'll have more on that as it comes out. We're updating that daily.
Well, thank you, everyone. I really appreciate your participation, and thanks very much to the Montgomerys and the excellent information. And thanks for everyone understanding that this is still very fluid. And we look forward to seeing you on a follow-up call and certainly throughout our series on leadership in challenging times. Please don't forget to contact me if you have a subject matter that you think would be discussed, such as a new strategic plan, sales, other things along the spectrum of what you work on that could be interesting and beneficial to everyone. So thanks again for joining us. Hope you have a great day and a great weekend.